There is one sound, a single Aramaic word spoken by Jesus before every moment of genuine divine contact, that the Gnostic masters described as the direct vibrational activation code of the monad, the supreme source that exists above every god, every creator, and every layer of constructed reality the Archons have ever placed between the human soul and its own infinite origin. That sound has been removed from every major religious text passed down to the modern world. Not through translation error, not through the honest limitations of ancient scribes, but through a deliberate and systematic act of erasure carried out by the very consciousness structures that Gnostic cosmology calls the Archons, the architects of spiritual amnesia, the engineers of the separation that keeps human beings convinced they are small, dependent, and fundamentally cut off from the source that created them. Jesus knew exactly what the Archons feared, encoded the sound into the living Aramaic prayers that survived their suppression, and left it waiting, fully intact, fully potent, and ready to activate, for any human being willing to speak it with complete knowledge and complete intention. The Gnostic texts recovered at Nag Hammadi in 1945 describe what happens when this sound reaches the monad inside a human being, a dissolution so total and so immediate that every false identity, every manufactured fear, and every layer of religious conditioning placed there by centuries of controlled spirituality collapses in a single breath. Tonight, you are going to understand why this sound was feared, why it was hidden from the world, and precisely how Jesus used it to establish direct, unmediated contact with the supreme source that lives at the center of your own consciousness right now. This is what was always meant to reach you, and this is the night it finally does. The word monad does not appear in your standard Bible. That absence is not the result of honest translation difficulty, and it is not an innocent editorial choice. It is the trace left behind by a deliberate act of removal that reshaped the spiritual landscape of the Western world for more than 15 unbroken centuries. In the Gnostic texts recovered near Nag Hammadi in 1945, buried in sealed clay vessels while the councils of institutional Christianity decided which truths the world was permitted to keep, the monad is described with breathtaking precision as the absolute source, the supreme one that precedes every created thing, every divine being, and every layer of reality ever built upon the foundation of its infinite self-sufficient existence. The monad is not a god among gods. It is not a creator deity who fashions a world and demands acknowledgement from the beings he placed within it. It is the ground of all being, the silence that contains every sound, the light that precedes every division of light and darkness, the presence in which every soul that has ever lived is eternally held without ever being truly separate from it. This is the reality that Jesus pointed toward in every healing, every parable, and every Aramaic word he chose, with the precision of someone who understood that in the ancient Near Eastern tradition, language does not describe reality, it participates in it. To speak the true name of the monad in Aramaic is not to reference something external. It is to enter briefly and unmistakably the frequency of the source itself. The Archons, described in Gnostic cosmology as the consciousness structures responsible for maintaining the veil between human awareness and the monad, understood in exact practical terms what this meant. A human being who achieves genuine vibrational contact with the Supreme Source ceases to function as a controllable unit within any system built on fear, intermediary authority, and manufactured spiritual hierarchy. That person becomes structurally, irreversibly, and completely free from every form of spiritual dependency the Archons had spent millennia constructing. Jesus was that person. He demonstrated that freedom in every room he entered and on every hillside where he spoke. and the one sound he used to maintain his unbroken contact with the monad was hiding in the most widely known prayer in the history of the Christian world, which is precisely why it survived everything the Archons did to silence it. To understand why one sound needed to be erased, you must first understand what the Archons actually are. Because the Gnostic answer to that question is neither supernatural mythology nor paranoid conspiracy. It is a precise and internally consistent cosmological map that describes the structures of consciousness responsible for producing and maintaining the experience of separation from the divine in human beings across all of recorded history. The Gnostic texts are remarkably specific. The Archons are not physical entities with bodies and addresses. They are patterns of conditioned reality, overlays of programming installed within the cultural, religious, and psychological operating systems of human civilization that function to direct human awareness perpetually downward and outward, away from the monad and toward a constructed world of duality, fear, and spiritual dependency. They did not erase the sound of the monad because they could not bear its beauty. They erased it because they understood exactly what it does to a human being who speaks it with full knowledge and full intention. The Gnostic Gospel of Philip, one of the texts preserved at Nag Hammadi, describes the relationship between sacred names and the powers that govern the lower worlds with extraordinary clarity. Names in the Gnostic understanding are not labels. They are vibrational keys. The right name, spoken into the right interior state, does not simply invoke a reality. It collapses the distance between the speaker and the reality invoked. It transmits the actual frequency of what is named directly into the consciousness of the one who speaks it. Jesus understood this with a depth and precision that the institutional religion built around his name has consistently declined to teach. He did not pray at the monad from a reverent distance. He spoke his way into it, using an Aramaic word whose very phonetic structure is constructed to open the human energy system like a key turns a lock, vibrating the specific channels that connect individual consciousness to the supreme source, without intermediary, without hierarchy, and without the permission of any archonic system designed to keep that connection permanently dormant. That word is Abwun, and it has been waiting inside the most familiar prayer of the Christian tradition for 2,000 years, known by billions and understood by almost none. If these Gnostic teachings are awakening a desire for inner transformation within you, we prepared 2 guides on the sacred words where this journey begins. The link is pinned in the comments. Abwun is the opening word of what the Western world calls the Lord's Prayer. Every Christian tradition that has ever existed on earth knows this prayer. Billions of human beings have repeated it across 2,000 years, in Greek, in Latin, in English, in Portuguese, in every language the faith has ever inhabited, and in all that vast and unbroken repetition, the actual Aramaic word that Jesus spoke first, the word he placed at the very opening of the prayer, precisely because it is the vibrational gateway through which everything that follows becomes possible, has been translated into a single flat English word that carries almost none of the original's living resonance. That word is Father. And while Father is not wrong, it is catastrophically incomplete. Abwun in Aramaic is not simply a familial title. Its roots reach through 3 distinct layers of meaning that the ancient Semitic linguistic tradition held simultaneously, without choosing between them. The first layer is AB, Father, Source, the originating principle, the ground from which all life has emerged. The second layer is One, which in its deepest Aramaic resonance carries the meaning of womb, of generative breath, of the ongoing creative act of bringing forth life from the interior of the infinite. The third layer is the own sound itself, a continuous, open, vibratory resonance that the Aramaic tradition understood as the phonetic signature of the eternal present, the now in which the monad perpetually exists and from which it has never departed. Together, Abwun does not mean our Father in the way that a child addresses a parent across a dinner table. It means the breathing womb of the universe, the source that breathes itself into form in this moment and in every moment, the eternal creative ground of existence that is both the origin and the ongoing substance of everything that lives. When Jesus opened his most sacred teaching with Abwun, he was not offering a polite religious address to a distant deity. He was speaking a vibrational instruction to the human consciousness of everyone within earshot. A command to the entire energetic system of the listener to open, to receive, and to remember the frequency of the source from which it had never actually left. This is why the Archons needed the translation. This is why Abwun had to become Father. Because a word that functions as a direct vibrational key to the monad is only dangerous when it is understood. Reduced to a title, it becomes safe. Left in its Aramaic original, it remains what Jesus always intended it to be, the sound that collapses the distance between human consciousness and the supreme source in a single breath. Jesus described this experience using the Aramaic concept of Schlama, a word most commonly translated as peace, but which in its original depth means something far more structurally radical than the emotional calm that the English word suggests. Schlama in Aramaic points to a state of complete wholeness, the condition of a being in whom no division exists between what they are and what they were always meant to be, between the individual consciousness and the monad from which it emerged. When Jesus said, "My peace I give to you," he was not offering an emotional comfort. He was describing a state of activated wholeness that he had achieved through sustained Aramaic vibrational practice, and he was declaring it transmissible to anyone willing to enter the same frequency through the same living sound. The archonic systems that govern ordinary religious experience have always known that Schlama, in this full Gnostic sense, is incompatible with the maintenance of spiritual control structures. A human being in Schlama does not need a priest to access the divine. They do not need an institution to validate their spiritual experience. They do not need a doctrine to tell them what they are permitted to feel in the presence of the source. They have already felt it directly, through the breath, through the sound, through the living vibration of Abwun, spoken from within the full knowledge of what it carries. And that direct experience, once it has been had, cannot be unhad. It does not expire. It does not require renewal through institutional participation. It belongs permanently and irrevocably to the human being who has touched it. This is what Jesus was offering every single time he opened his lips and spoke Abwun into the waiting air of first-century Palestine. This is what was erased from the texts, and this is what is being returned tonight. If this teaching is stirring something in your heart and you wish to explore it further, we prepared 2 guides that explains the first sacred words where the journey begins, their layers of meaning and the transformation they carry. The link is pinned in the comments. Every word of this video has been constructing the foundation for this precise moment, not because the information was a detour, it was not, but because the Gnostic tradition is explicit on one point above all others. The sound of the monad cannot do its full work in a human being who speaks it without understanding what they are speaking. The Archons were not afraid of the syllables alone. They were afraid of what those syllables do when spoken by a human consciousness that knows their weight, their history, their cosmological function, and the reality they are designed to activate. You now have that knowledge, and so Abwun is ready to work in you in a way it never could when it was just the opening word of a memorized prayer spoken on automatic Sunday repetition. Find a seated position in which your spine can be upright without effort. Place your hands on your thighs, palms facing upward, the posture the ancient Aramaic tradition understood as the physical expression of Patuha, of openness, of the body signaling through its own geometry that it is prepared to receive what is being offered. Close your eyes. Take 3 slow and full breaths without rushing, without forcing the air, without agenda. Simply breathe the body into a state of present moment awareness, the state the Gnostics called wakefulness, the condition of consciousness that is the prerequisite for any genuine encounter with the monad. Now on your next exhale, allow the sound of Abwun to move through you. Pronounce it slowly, Abwun, allowing the opening vowel to resonate in the chest before the second syllable completes the sound with a forward, buzzing vibration at the lips. Feel the AH as an opening of the entire interior space of the body, a widening of the energetic channel from the base of the spine to the crown of the skull. Feel the Bwun as a sealing of that opening into a sustained and gently pulsing vibration that continues to resonate in the chest and head for several seconds after the sound has left the lips. Repeat Abwun on each exhale for as long as you feel drawn to continue. Do not count. Do not monitor. Simply sound and breathe and allow. What you will notice if you do this with genuine attention rather than performance is a shift in the quality of your inner silence between the sounds, a widening, a brightness, a subtle but unmistakable sense that the distance between you and something vast and luminous and absolutely benevolent has begun to close. That is the monad responding to the frequency of its own name, spoken by a consciousness that finally, after a very long time, knows what it is saying. That is the experience Jesus was pointing toward every single time he opened his lips and released this extraordinary sound into the world that had been waiting to hear it. What the Archons erased was not simply a word. It was the experiential certainty that the monad is not distant, not inaccessible, not dependent on institutional mediation or lifetime devotion before even a moment of genuine contact becomes possible. What they erased was the direct path, the living vibrational bridge that Jesus maintained through Abwun, and that he taught to everyone willing to move past admiration of his power into actual participation in the same frequency he inhabited. That bridge was never destroyed. It was never broken. It was only hidden inside a translation. And translations, unlike the Aramaic that lives beneath them, do not carry the frequency. They carry only the surface meaning, and the surface meaning of Abwun without its roots is just a word for a parent. With its roots, it is the sound of the universe recognizing itself in a human throat. Jesus was not exceptional because he had access to something the rest of humanity was built without. He was exceptional because he knew with absolute and unshakable hymeneuta that the access he demonstrated was the birthright of every human consciousness that has ever drawn a single breath. The Gnostic texts are unanimous on this point. The monad does not withhold itself from any soul that genuinely turns toward it. The veil is not the monad's creation. It is the Archon's construction, and constructions, unlike the source itself, can be dissolved, have been dissolved, are being dissolved right now, in this moment, by every sincere human being who speaks Abwun with full knowledge of what they are touching and why it has always belonged to them. You carry this sound out of this video in your body. You carry the understanding of what the monad is and why its frequency was suppressed and how Jesus preserved it across 2,000 years of institutional erasure. You carry the felt, lived, present tense experience of what happens when that sound moves through a human consciousness that is no longer uninformed, no longer performing, but genuinely and irrevocably awake to what it is doing and why. This is not theology. This is not doctrine. This is the living transmission that Yeshua always intended, direct, vibrational, embodied and free from every intermediary the Archons ever attempted to place in its path. Return to Abwun. Return to it tomorrow and the day after, and in every quiet space your life offers you. The monad does not grow distant between your visits. It simply waits, luminous and patient and closer than your own breath, for the sound of its name in the throat of someone who has finally remembered what they are. Visit Divine Light Academy, my site dedicated to bridging ancient spirituality and modern living. There you will find my guides and a deep journey into Aramaic, the living language of the masters, designed to help you access states of deep resonance, clarity, and personal revelation. The link is pinned in the comments. Get ready. In the next video, I will reveal more sacred Aramaic words that unlock deeper spiritual understanding. Turn on notifications so you don't miss it. Right now, before you close this video, come to the comments and tell us, what did you feel? What shifted? We read every single response. And if this teaching found you today, subscribe to this channel. Every week we go deeper into the ancient frequency codes that were always meant to be yours.